Welcome to First Builders, the podcast for those who shape companies from the ground up. I'm Amber Illig, founder and general partner at the Council Capital, where we invest in early teams solving critical problems in essential industries.
And I'm Rachel Tsui, partner at the Council. Every week, we talk with founders who are building in complex and often overlooked spaces and are doing the hard work of making systems actually work for people.
And today's guest is building infrastructure for dignity at the intersection of work, care, and the public safety net.
We're joined by Siran Cao, co-founder and CEO of Mirza, a company making safety net benefits accessible through a simple mobile-first experience that helps families understand what they are eligible for and how to apply.
Before founding Mirza, Siran spent several years at Uber, where she built and scaled driver support operations in New York and across the Northeast. She led large teams, managed significant operating budgets, and became a strong advocate for workers navigating fragmented systems.
And now she's applying that operational mindset to one of the hardest problems in the country, helping families access childcare subsidies, health coverage, nutrition benefits, and other essential support.
Siran, we're so excited to have you here. Welcome to First Builders.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in. Let's start with your time at Uber. You built and led large partner support organizations serving tens of thousands of drivers. Can you just kind of set the stage a little bit for our audience of what that moment was like and what it taught you about maybe the broken access to benefits and support systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started at Uber back in 2015. At that time, all of the ops managers, so the role that I was in, we all had these various shifts where we would go to the airport parking lots, try to get more drivers signed up for Uber, and then also do some level of support for folks so that we can keep drivers online. So as part of all of that, my job was to figure out how to build and scale an org that would remove that operational burden from ops managers and allow us to also then be focused on all of the other parts of the business. So eventually I wound up building a large hourly support team, close to 200 people out of Queens. And in those early days, I hired a lot of those early folks. And as part of that, brought on a lot of single moms, despite the fact that I was able to dictate scheduling and think through those opportunities to build start and end times around school pickup drop-offs. Childcare was often a pretty big disruption for my team. And importantly, that larger benefits landscape was as well. So I learned about the benefits cliff for the first time during my time at Uber, the times when an hourly worker can't take a larger, higher paid opportunity because that increase in income also comes or would kick someone over the earning threshold for an important benefit like childcare or housing. And the extra $2 an hour, for example, would not offset the tens of thousands of dollars that childcare costs for 2 kids or housing would cost. So that is one of those things that, the way that the benefit system is designed actually keeps people trapped within the jobs that may not actually provide the advancement opportunities that we want. So coming out of all of that, I had wound up reconnecting with one of my employees a few years later and learned that that she had missed the window to apply for subsidized summer care one summer. And as a result, I had relied on a loan to be able to bridge that gap. And that was something that really just blew my mind. The fact that someone who could be getting subsidies for a younger child would then need to apply separately for coverage for her older kid during the summer. It feels like it's all the same government. It's all even the same benefit itself. It shouldn't be this fragmented and the onus shouldn't be that much on the individual. So if you actually zoom out from there, beyond just that early childhood space and how deeply fragmented that is, that exists across the board when it comes to navigating nutrition, healthcare, housing, and so on. It is the same person sharing their same story, same information 3 to 5 times across these different government offices.
Yeah. No, it's wild to hear kind of like how, just fragmented, like you were saying, it is, because people know about these benefits, I think, at a very high level, but unless you're kind of really in it, and thinking about like the application, like the complexity really of all of that. I don't think people realize that it's, maybe tight windows or like you don't know until it's too late and then you lose it. Like you were saying, like you're one of your former employees as well. I think that you've shared before also like either publicly that your mom has been a really big inspiration for you. How did your personal background shape the kind of problems that you felt drawn to work on, especially with Mirza?
Yeah. Well, hiring a bunch of single moms onto my hourly support team was very
That'll do
much
it.
a
Yeah.
product of being raised by a single mom. But when my family moved to the States, my family settled in Allegheny County in Pittsburgh. And at the time, I was 8 years old, but my parents wound up splitting pretty soon after we moved. And so I watched my mom navigate a really fragmented benefits land. And when it comes to, at the beginning, we talked a little bit about why dignity is so core to what we do and needing my help, for instance, to navigate something that is just in a second language is a matter of dignity. Even when you are 8, you will realize that, mom didn't like having to ask me for help. And so now fast forward to Mirza, native language is just built in and it's essential and critical to what we do. We will make sure that we cover the native languages in an area because we want to make sure that every parent, every applicant can interact in the way that is most comfortable to them.
Wow, this is awesome, and what an interesting time to be working on this problem too, because I feel like it's just like on the public stage 24/7. Everybody's feeling the pain of childcare costs, no matter what class you're in, and like you said, there's that like sort of messy middle where it's like you're just making just enough to get it a promotion, but not enough to manage the cost of that important care. So I guess like when you decided to start Mirza, like it's such a big problem to tackle. What felt most intimidating about building in such a regulated, policy heavy space that's kind of always changing and on the public stage?
Yeah, well, I would say when we had started Mirza, I didn't even realize going in some of the problems that we would be facing. We can put a pin in this and return to it, but within the government benefits landscape, there's also a large part of this infrastructure that is built in mainframes, like old IBM,
Wow.
COBOL based systems that wanting to offer better experiences also needs to contend with because that is the day to day of all of the caseworkers and who are working directly with families and want to be supporting families. That is their day to day. So building any just better sort of front end interface also means how we transmit data and information needs to account for that. Kind of going back to what some of the things we didn't really realize and unpacking that, starting the company and wanting to get into the government benefit space, I certainly was not in a place where I would have expected the country to have areas where Medicaid is, that there have been billions cut from Medicaid and SNAP, that there would be states where whether or not SNAP will exist is a question mark. So being in that space that now it is genuinely a concern for me whether or not some parts of the country will have food assistance at all. But yeah, it's a kind of wild level of involvement that I never imagined. When we first got started, it was purely just thinking that the early childhood space is so fragmented. And that made no sense because it's all the same family. Childcare is so critical to work that we need to be making early childhood safety net benefits more accessible for folks. And then zooming out from there. At the same time that we were launching nutrition and health assistance, we were seeing some of the federal legislation starting to move that would introduce work requirements for Medicaid, expanding it for SNAP, and then also introducing these very high penalties for states associated with error rates that now are putting the program at risk entirely.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that it's almost existential in a way, just because there's been so many changes over the past year and a half, in this space, especially for public benefits. I guess one of the things I know, even when we met you, I think the first time when you were pitching at the Council Angels, you mentioned that Mirza is kind of like a TurboTax like experience, right, for public benefits. How do you think about kind of simplifying something without minimizing all that complexity that the families are dealing with and are managing throughout that?
Yeah. So I think about, how in that TurboTax experience, when you enter the experience, there are portions that are already pre-filled for you because TurboTax can actually get either publicly available or payroll or other data sources and pipe that in. That's the same sort of goal in my mind. Not only within Mirza, at a core, we have a product where you can figure out what you qualify for and apply across those programs just once using us. And we will do the hard work on the back end to get all of those programs submitted. So we already will take all that information, all those requirements, and look at what is the same across all of them? How do we simplify and deduce information so you don't need to share it multiple times? A question that might exist in one form but not another might be something that we can just purely figure out through other answers that you've given. So we don't need to introduce the mental load or the barrier of yet another thing to fill out. Similarly, for your work schedule, there are places we can actually get that information. That is your Roller HR system. We can get proof of work from those systems or from gig platforms. So being able to actually take the view of minimizing the amount of information that you as an individual need to share on your own, the fields that you need to fill out on your own, also means for us thinking about what are all of the sources that we can actually get this from. If we can let you, for example, upload a utility bill, which you'll need to
Mm,
anyway, then why don't we just grab your address from it? So you don't need to
mm.
that into a form. It's all of that very deliberate thinking of how do I reduce?
That's awesome. Yeah, anytime I've had to fill out any sort of government form or healthcare related form, it's been crazy. So I love that you're actually thinking about the end user experience there, particularly because folks don't have that much time to be sitting down and doing this. And you're building for these people that have often been failed by institutions. What have you learned about earning their trust through that process when they're kind of already exhausted by the system?
Yeah. Reaching people at a through trusted sources, I think, has been really critical for us. Part of uh, the data where you see, for example, there's over $140 billion of government benefits that go unclaimed each year.
Wow.
That is largely, there are gaps that are coming from knowledge gaps, but then there are a lot of structural barriers and how tricky those applications are to navigate. Then there's the social stuff like trust or stigma and so on. All of this is really complex, but reaching people to deliver them a better experience that they trust means for us having started with channels like employers, unions, colleges, and so on, where people are used to that organization delivering a benefit for you or a service for you that's meant to help. And we've been able to use those opportunities to start building trust with folks. Similarly, we've started working through Medicaid managed care organizations that also are meant to help make sure that their members have resources to take care of their health and have coverage. So using some of those sorts of channels give us both the reach to individual users, but also the credibility and trust that a third party sometimes can offer. What has been so lovely is hearing from our users that
I
they're
bet.
someone is building for them and this level of trust that if my union or my employer is offering something, I might have had a bad experience with the government experience before. I might have higher trust in this resource that my union or my company helped choose for me and they have vetted and is a third party that doesn't ask me information that I don't want to share. It's all consent. Really, we support a lot of immigrant or mixed status families. So we're really deliberate about not asking you for any immigration or citizenship information, but instead showing folks here are the programs that you would qualify for based on non identifiable information. And then we're going to tell you these programs in particular have a documentation requirement when you apply. And then we allow people to then just opt in and choose for themselves. And that is a way of also then making sure we're not putting people in any position. It's all user driven, and we're not putting people in positions where they can be uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I have sort of a beginner level question, but I'm seeing like more and more state level or even city level programs popping up around childcare. And I'm curious if you're getting involved in different regions as they're kicking things off with different structures. Like even here in San Francisco, Daniel Lurie announced that now they're going to be covering childcare from, and I can't even remember the parameters, but it was like from a certain age to until public school and then certain income brackets. Is Mirza able to come in and kind of work through those programs as well, in addition to some of the more federal programs going on?
Yeah. When we got started in childcare, that was very much the thesis that local, state, and federal programs are so fragmented across the board.
Yeah.
And so that is very much the of what we do and why we are very much built for the complexity that now is getting introduced at a heavier level federally. Um, but then when we first got started, we had one single place where New York City specific programs and Head Start, which is federal to local, as well as the state subsidies could all live in one single portal. That same analogy can exist in San Francisco. And so we get hyper local to make sure that all of the available resources based on your zip code, we can
Good.
we have a version of our product, for example, that's publicly available for all New Yorkers to use to figure out what are all of the childcare subsidized programs across the board that they have access to. And we'll be launching later in the spring a single point of entry for all early learning programs in Minnesota in a handful of counties. You'll be able to see for the first time the state funded early learning scholarship, the federal child care and development block grant funded CCAP program in that single place alongside Head Start, and so on. And we do something similar in parts of Ohio as well, and also include prenatal through five benefits, WIC, home visiting for developmental support. So it's getting to be able to stay very deep in the early childhood space is really lovely.
That's awesome. And do you do some work on the care facility side as well? And the reason I'm asking is I hear people asking a lot of questions around here like, okay, this is so great that we get this benefit now, but which daycares and which preschools can I send my kid to that are part of the program? And then everybody's like, well, we don't know if our preschool is going to be on it or not because it's going to be this very specific list that, you know, at some point is just going to drop from the city. We don't even know what website it's going to be on. Like it's that fragmented. So I love what you're doing, but I'm curious if there's an angle here too on like the care facility side where like they also now need to figure out how these programs work so that they can offer this to citizens.
So we really stay on the family or applicant side, but we have good partners that we would work with on the care provider side. So, for example, in New York City, this New York City Childcare Navigator, where we're publicly available, we've worked with a partner of ours called Upfront that we have integrated to pass through the data of what an individual family is eligible for, their zip code, their children's ages, and it goes directly into a filtered search. So you'll be able to get, based on your zip code, the providers in your area who can care for children of your children's ages, as well as who are the ones that will accept Head Start or New York City childcare vouchers and so on. In other areas where we don't have that partner, we'll still work with local referral and resource centers, which are the organizations on the ground working very locally to not only help families find childcare, but also are deeply embedded in supply building and bringing more providers, providing technical assistance directly on behalf of the state for providers.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's super exciting to hear. Just kind of like how you're getting involved in the federal level, local level, and making sure that it kind of spans, all of that as well. The question I have is, it always seems like a lot of founders will sometimes avoid the care economy because progress can feel really slow. Obviously, I can hear a lot of the passion that you have for what you're building in Mirza, but what keeps you really committed to building for this anyway, despite that?
I think the care economy is just fundamentally core workforce infrastructure from a there is data that more than 60% of women who aren't fully employed want to be, but simply can't afford childcare. And what an absolutely wild reason to have a portion of our workforce sidelined. And the care economy is also one of the segments of our economy that is going to be very AI proof. Caring for whether it's caring for a child or an adult family member, that is one of the most dignified and loving and important pieces of work that we do. And just the fundamental fact that because we've often viewed it as women's work means that it goes very underpaid. And so there are just so many aspects of this that I find a deeply important and fascinating economic issue. And that changing perceptions is a really interesting task, whether that is the value of the work itself, especially as the need for more care economy workers changes and how the jobs in our economy that exist also starts to shift and change. But similarly, really being able to shift perceptions and views that this actually is infrastructure itself.
Love that. Like describing this is a workforce issue. This is an infrastructure issue, which is 1000% true. And we talk about a lot at the council, essential industries, like they survive boom cycles, they survive bust cycles because everybody essentially is a user of these industries and these infrastructure level problems. So I like that you frame it that way. It's not just a family problem or just a women's problem or just a parent's problem. It's everybody's problem if we can't solve it. Yeah.
Yeah. And similarly to
Yeah.
what you were saying too about the AI proof aspect of it, I don't know if you saw or were referring to the Anthropic little bubble that showed like the different sectors. And I know like, I think personal care and like just care in general was like one of the ones where even theoretically, like AI hasn't really like kind of pushed into yet. So, yeah.
Wide open. Awesome. And then what do you think is the biggest misconception that people have when they hear about benefits access or care work?
So, gosh, I think the care work's a really easy one that we make these assumptions that even for even for folks who might have the ability to have flexible work or work from home, that childcare, that caregivers then no longer actually need support. And that's very much not the case. And I'm sure any parent who has worked from home is very
Yep.
cognizant that
I'm very aware.
yeah,
Yes.
and I think there are so many assumptions when it comes to public benefits access. And they exist at all levels of just there's a very large assumption that people don't know that something exists. Everyone knows that there is. Everyone knows that there is food assistance. The problems with access really live um, in different arenas there. Whereas on the flip side, for WIC, which is a supplemental nutrition support for women, infants, and children, there are some larger knowledge gaps and then a bunch of systems level issues. So I think just looking at benefits itself, assuming that you can inform people of what is out there, and then even just telling people what they may qualify for isn't enough. Being able to actually make the process dignified and streamlined is a really critical next step.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then I'd love to hear a little bit too about, you talked about how you started in childcare and then you've expanded right now into like the health, nutrition benefits. How did you as a founder decide to like where to stay focused versus when to meet the moment?
Yeah. Wow. So there were these two forces that were driving it for us. One was we had customers that were asking us to expand to nutrition assistance. For example, we actually have employer partners that realized that that food benefits or food security was an area of need for some of their frontline workers. Similarly, for our Medicaid health plan partners, nutrition is absolutely both a driver in terms of health costs, but also one of the top social determinants of health that they need to be addressing for their members. So there's very much just that business and customer demand. But on a similar side, as part of our work, we are constantly talking to our users to understand their experience more, figure out how we can simplify the product, the things that we should change, whether we said something correctly in a native language. In one of those conversations, I had to thank people for their time. We will, especially folks who will do an interview with us, will offer Amazon gift cards. And I had one of those folks tell me towards the end of the conversation that she was grateful, or her baby was grateful for the Amazon gift card so she could afford some diapers. And that's a gut punch. Even just knowing that this is someone we helped access childcare subsidies, but there's just so many other affordability issues. I should say, Snap or WIC, nutrition assistance doesn't cover diapers. Whether or not I think it should is a different question, is a different point. But it really pointed to, God, there are so many other areas here where we can help reduce out of pocket or spending costs for our users. And given we have this basic infrastructure, information to apply is the same. We're doing a disservice to them if we're not also then making sure that they're applying for all of these other benefits.
Yeah. And one thing you touched on is it's obviously really emotionally heavy work. I mean, seeing your customers and what's going on in their lives as you're interviewing them for your product is very emotionally heavy. So how do you take care of yourself while building for families that are under stress?
That is a fantastic question. I think it was probably I was better about it prior to HR1, the one big beautiful bill that introduced
Sure.
SNAP Medicaid work requirements, SNAP error rate sorts of issues that puts food assistance at risk. In general, I try to make sure I make time for 4 times a week. I power lift. That's my thing. It's
That's awesome.
time to just, well, be purely focused because there's no choice otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other habits besides like powerlifting or any routines that you do to help you stay grounded, especially when the work is, obviously very urgent and of course very high stakes?
I make sure I start the day with a walk in the morning, which is really nice.
That's awesome.
A bit of just mental clarity time or to just take a bit and move first thing in the morning. But honestly, what keeps me grounded the most when times are challenging and the wider landscape is challenging is to also just think about how grateful I am to get to do this work. I am always going to be a person, and I have always been a person who is very much in tune and on top of the larger political landscape and the implications for are the communities around me. And if I weren't in a position to be making a real run at mitigating the impact, I think I would be in a worse mental state. Getting to actually do
Feel more
something.
helpless. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's awesome. And then coming full circle, we kind of glossed over this at the beginning, and then we were so excited to learn more about Mirza and what you're building. But you were also early at Uber. So what's a lesson from Uber that has kind of translated and come with you as a founder in terms of how you build this company internally?
Yeah, I think early Uber had a rogue don't ask permission streak. And I think that very much is sort of core to how Mirza got started as well. We submitted applications for public benefits and we weren't the official government system. We just saw an opportunity to offer applicants, families, individuals a nicer experience. And if we had tried to initially start by approaching government, I think it would have taken us much longer to be able to support people and get to where we are. And it was actually really nice to be able to build some credibility and having delivered a nice user centric experience and that it didn't have to be really expensive and really hard. That has now helped us build some credibility and goodwill with the government administrators as well from there. I think maybe a anti-lesson from Uber though was I think early Uber was certainly really combative, and we have tried to not be combative and more taken the tact of finding out the areas where we can help support caseworker workload or burden. And so, what are the issues that when we are submitting applications, we can make sure to help resolve in addition?
It's awesome. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I do love like the basically not asking for kind of like permission to get out there. That's probably one of the best lessons from being early at Uber of just making it work. So, um, you mentioned obviously like the impact a policy has on Mirza, and you've, probably have talked to so many, investors, policymakers, partners that don't always understand the space. How do you translate the importance of the care economy, especially for policymakers or for other folks who just weren't really kind of, making that time or that focus there?
I think there are some really great groups out there like Moms First, in New York City, New Yorkers United for Childcare that are really making pushes on translating the care economy into policy and doing it on a variety of fronts. Um, our our work in particular is to be able to both bring the data and business sense for why what portion of the workforce is getting left out because of unaffordable childcare and what contribution that's actually missing. And that sort of same thing goes when it comes to healthcare. There are health related implications of not having childcare. Childcare is the top reason women of reproductive age miss doctor's appointments. And for a Medicaid population, there are a whole host of risks down the line that this can drive if we are talking about a woman early in her first trimester missing appointments and the opportunities to actually identify issues really. And so I think my job is to be able to bring that data point and then put it into very real dollar value impact for the organizations we work with or the policymakers we talk to. And alongside then also be able to bring forward alongside that a solution and the examples of how we work, the families we've supported, the outcomes we drive. And what has been really powerful to highlight is with our work with the New York City Teachers Union, for example, within the first 6 months, 42% of the users we helped to access childcare subsidy went on to increase their household income. In half of those families, the parent was able to go back to work. That is very clearly underscoring childcare was a movable barrier. And when you move it, this is exactly the outcome that policymakers want.
Those are incredible stats.
Yeah. And then what's something about you that doesn't usually come up in founder conversations, but deeply shapes how you lead?
That's a really great question. I think I lead from a place of having personal experience that's really driving the work itself. So core to what I do and how I show up to the team is also leaning into what drives or what motivates my team and every member of my team to be here at Mirza and to be in this work itself. We are so fortunate to be a company, a startup that has a mission that people can really resonate with. And every single member of our team has a personal reason that really drives them to be doing this work. And in a extremely fast-paced and demanding environment with a lot of macro pressures and stress, and being able to make sure we always go back to that.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we're going to transition the conversation to the last segment, which is rapid fire playbook questions. So you can just answer with the first thing that comes to your mind, and it can be really quick. But I'll kick us off. So we talk a lot about first builders. These are the people that take things from 0 to 1, building products, processes, and teams from scratch at early stage companies. So you're very much a first builder in your time at Uber, now turned as a founder. But I suspect there are also first builders on your team that are helping your company get off the ground. So what do you think is the most underrated skill for a first builder?
A bit of a daredevilness and fearlessness. So not not getting scared by a problem that can seem absolutely out of realm, and instead being interested in it and wanting to actually dive into something that's a bit scary.
I love that.
Yeah, and I can hear it also, like, which is anytime you're
Mhm.
talking about, like, the company and why you got in and how you're continuing to build it. Yeah. Cool. So for me, a book, article, or person that shaped how you think about systems and equity.
Oh, so one of my favorites is a book called Unbearable Weight by Susan Boyle. I was a gender studies major in college, and that was one of just the books that made it so interesting to unpack what are all of the components that, or the influences that drive the way that we think and have created our own perceptions of self, our image, and so on.
Yeah.
And I think being able to then apply that same lens, it's fascinating to be able to think about why people come with the assumptions they do or the stance that they do. And it makes showing up with empathy in every single place. Easier.
That's awesome. I'm adding that to my list for sure.
Yeah.
What's one belief you hold strongly, maybe even controversially, about building in the care economy?
Uh, this is going to be controversial, knowing folks in the care economy, that making an argument based on principle and the value of early childhood for a child is not enough. We live in a very capitalist society where we need to put this in terms of workforce and what is the value for people.
Yeah. And then what's one thing that you used to believe about startups that you no longer do?
I hope this doesn't sound jaded, that it is, uh, that it is a lot of fun. This is during my time at Uber, it was really hard work, but also a lot of fun, so much camaraderie, and realizing now as a founder that everything fits with me. Uh, the contracts, the fundraising. You know what? Honestly, it isn't that same sort of we're all in this together. There's a lot more. I need to make sure that my team has money coming in the door for their jobs. And that is different level of responsibility than we're all in this together working towards it.
Yeah. Founders harbor so much weight. I mean, it's crazy because they have their own role. They're not the investor, they're not the employee. It's like they have themselves and maybe a co-founder, and that's it. The only people that are in that with them at the same level. So, well, thank you so much. That kind of wraps up the rapid fire questions. But really excited to have had you on the podcast today. It's been awesome just kind of watching your journey over the past few years. And where can people follow your work and learn more about Mirza?
So our website itself is heymyrza.com, Mirza. And then I am on LinkedIn, so is the company itself. And then I think that's probably the best place because unfortunately, we're not big Twitter or Instagram users. B2B or B2G is
Yeah.
different from shit.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
For having me.
Awesome to have you on. That was such an awesome conversation. Corinne is so inspiring. And actually, I know you and I have discussed this before, but we've been almost like two ships in the night. I think first time I met her was before we had a fund. And then just seeing what she's built today has just been incredible to watch. Yeah, definitely have some FOMO there.
I know. I know. She is. She's truly incredible. So what stood out to you?
Yeah, I think I really liked how she's obviously a very impact driven founder. She has a personal mission attached to what she's building. And and yet she understands that we're in a capitalist world and we have to design a business that makes sense at the end of the day, makes sense to be a venture scale business, and not everything that is worth building and impactful has to go through the nonprofit route or the like government first route. I like that she's like, let me build something that's working, build a venture scale company out of it, and then like let the product and the impact of the work and the economic model of it all speak for itself, and we'll get the right parties on board. So I liked that. I like that. And then, related to the impact angle, one thing that we look for at the council, as you know, is when we're kind of vetting founders that we would want to invest in, one thing we look at is, do they have a personal attachment to what they're building? Because we know that, whether you're building a, vertical AI tool to be used in the back office of a medical practice, or whether you're building something to help kids get, their lunches at school, there's like a range of the impact that you can have, but like we need to be able to know that when times get tough as you're building this company, you're going to want to stick it out and get through those sort of like troughs, or which can really kill companies. And so I like that she's just so attached to the mission, and she is approaching it with this fearless mentality because it matters so much to her. She saw it growing up with her mom being a single mom and having to navigate this fragmented system, and then seeing it again when she was at Uber,
Yeah.
helping single moms get on the platform. So to me, she's absolutely a mission-driven founder that's not going to give up. And there will be tough times where, any founder would consider giving up, but I think she's going to push through.
Totally. Yeah, I love that, like you were saying, that like mission alignment, because you can see that she has just really viewed this problem forever. Like you were saying, like from when, she mentioned when she was like 8 years old and her going through life like with her mom as a single mom and seeing all of that really bring through to what she's building at Mirza. And then I also loved like, how she really has like, you can even hear her like talk about like how she matured in her startup kind of like phase of like, oh, at Uber, it was different because she wasn't the founder and she could have that camaraderie. It was a lot more fun. But then now as a founder, like having that weight and the responsibility, but then also setting aside the time and the space to make sure she stays grounded so that she can really manage all that responsibility for her team, the company, all of her customers and users as well. The fact that she, power lifts, because that's like the only thing she can really focus
Yeah.
on. I love that, right? Like you can't think about
Yeah.
anything else. So it gives her probably that great space to stay grounded. And then just starting the day with a walk too is great too. I think just like probably clearing her head and everything to get back to the building also.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like it's come up multiple times on this podcast, having interviewed so many founders, like founder mental health always comes up when you start peeling back the onion, because it really is just, there's so much weight on these founders' backs. So they're working on such huge problems. They've got a lot of people on board that they've convinced to come be a part of it with them. So there's that responsibility as well. And I think just, general folks out in the workplace probably don't even understand that maybe their leader is going through that behind the scenes. And I think certainly as investors, we have a responsibility to kind of approach our work with empathy as well. So, and I think a lot of times people forget that because it's such a cut and dry industry. We're in the finance world ultimately, but we're working with people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review, share it with a friend, and subscribe to First Builders wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. And don't forget to subscribe to the council newsletter below for more founder stories and frameworks that you can apply to your own company.
Awesome. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.